Can you hide me from my uncle? The words slipped out so softly, they nearly vanished under the low hum of jukebox blues and the clink of beer bottles. Yet in that dim bar, lit by neon signs and thick with smoke, every leather-clad man froze. At the doorway stood Alice Robinson, 8 years old, a yellow lunch pack dangling from her shoulders like it was heavier than she was. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, carried a weight no child should bear. Viper, the scarred leader with storm-grey eyes, rose slowly from his stool. Blade, all muscle and menace, leaned forward, his jaw tightening. None of them spoke until Viper crouched down to her level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" His gravelly voice was low, almost gentle. Alice's fingers twisted around the straps of her pack. "Alice. Alice Robinson. And where's your mama?" Viper asked. Alice swallowed hard. "She works nights at the diner. But she didn't come home yesterday. Uncle Leroy said she went away, but—" Her voice cracked. "He hurts people. I think he hurt Mama. And he said I'm next." A silence heavier than gun smoke settled over the bar. Hardened men who'd stared down death more times than they could count shifted uneasily in their seats. Hit the subscribe button now, and if you believe that help can come at the very place you least expected, comment below, because what happens next will shock you. Now back to our story. Then Alice tugged at the zipper of her yellow lunch pack. The sound sliced through the stillness. She pulled out photographs, her mother with bruises on her face, envelopes of cash stuffed so tightly they bulged, and finally, a small thumb drive wrapped in a diner napkin. "My mama told me, if something bad ever happened, I should find the people who fight monsters, and give them this." Her voice trembled, but her small hands didn't waver. The bikers stared. These weren't the trinkets of a runaway. They were weapons, evidence powerful enough to burn down empires. From outside came the distant growl of engines. Headlights swept past the windows. Not one car. Several. Alice's face went pale. She hugged the lunch pack tight to her chest. "That's Uncle Leroy's friends," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't let them take me." And with that, the outlaws realized. They weren't looking at trouble. They were staring at a war walking through their door. That was how Alice Robinson, daughter of a tired waitress and target of a dangerous uncle, found her way into the most unlikely shelter, the arms of men the world called criminals. But her story didn't begin in the bar that night. It began long before, with a mother's quiet strength, an uncle's dark secret, and a child carrying evidence heavy enough to topple monsters. Alice had spent more nights than she could count inside Ruby's diner, the kind of roadside place where neon lights buzzed, coffee never stopped flowing, and tired truckers came and went like waves against the shore. Her mother, Clarissa Robinson, worked double shifts there, apron stained, hair tied back, smile painted on even when her bones ached. "Mama, you're tired," Alice would whisper from her usual booth seat, swinging her legs under the red vinyl cushions. "I'll rest later, baby," Clarissa always answered, sliding a plate across the counter for some stranger who left too small a tip. "Right now, we gotta keep moving. Moving keeps us safe." Alice didn't fully understand what her mama meant by safe. Not back then. But she noticed the way her mother's eyes lingered too long on the door whenever it opened, or how she sometimes flinched when certain men came in and asked for Leroy. At 8 years old, Alice lived her life inside that diner. The hiss of the grill, the scent of fried eggs, and the glow of fluorescent lights as her mama carried tray after tray. She did her homework at the table. She colored pictures on napkins. She learned to read people's faces. The kind ones, the mean ones, the ones who wanted something they didn't deserve. And every night, without fail, Uncle Leroy would show up. He wasn't really an uncle by blood. Clarissa always called him family, but Alice never believed it. Leroy was tall, broad-shouldered, with hands that looked more like fists than fingers. He smelled of whiskey and sweat, and something sharp Alice didn't know the name of back then, gunpowder. He'd sit at the counter, slam his boots on the footrail, and demand a plate like he owned the place. "You're late with the rent, Clarissa," he'd mutter, not caring who overheard. "Don't make me come around again." Clarissa would nod quickly, keeping her voice light for the customers. "I'll get it together, Leroy. Just a little more time." Sometimes, when the diner emptied out and the neon sign buzzed against the dark, Leroy leaned close, his voice a low growl. "Don't forget who's keeping you alive, sis. You don't pay, you don't breathe. And neither does that kid of yours." Alice never forgot the look in her mama's eyes in those moments. It wasn't just fear, it was something worse. Resignation. Like a person standing in the rain without an umbrella, knowing the storm wasn't going to pass. At home, Leroy came and went as he pleased. He slammed doors, shouted about business, left money on the counter when he wanted food, and left bruises behind when Mama disagreed. Alice learned quickly. When Leroy's voice rose, hide. When his boots hit the floor too hard, stay still. Monsters were loud before they got quiet. Alice never meant to overhear the worst of it. But kids listen when they're supposed to sleep. One night, long after the diner had closed, Leroy brought men to the house. Their cars idled outside, headlights off, engines humming like wolves waiting in the dark. Alice, curled under her blanket, listened as their voices drifted through the thin walls. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like the video, and comment below what time you are watching this, because what happened next will shock you. "Shipments coming through Friday," one man said. His accent was sharp, clipped, not local. "You better have the trucks ready." "They'll be ready," Leroy answered. "Route's clear. Cops won't know a thing." "And the girl?" someone else asked. For a long moment, silence. Then Leroy's voice, rougher than usual. "Don't worry about the kid. She'll do what she's told." Alice pulled the blanket tighter around herself, heart pounding. She didn't know what shipments meant, but she knew the way the men laughed after, deep and cruel, made her stomach turn. The next morning, Mama found her hiding under the kitchen table. "What's wrong, baby?" Alice whispered. "I heard Uncle talking about shipments." "And me?" Clarissa froze, coffee cup halfway to her lips. Slowly, she crouched down, brushed Alice's curls back, and whispered, "Don't ever let him hear you say that. Not ever. Promise me, Alice." Alice nodded, though she didn't understand. All she knew was that Mama's hands were shaking. Now, in the smoky neon glow of the Gangsters bar, Alice sat small on a stool, her yellow lunch pack clutched in her lap. Her voice trembled as she repeated what she remembered from Leroy's late-night dealings. "They talk about trucks, about routes, about shipments." She hesitated, eyes flicking up at Viper, then Blade, then the rest of the men watching her. I think they're not talking about things. I think they mean people." The bar went silent. Blade, who usually barked with laughter at nothing, swore under his breath. "Trafficking," he muttered. "The bastard's running flesh." Viper didn't move. His scarred face was unreadable, but his eyes, cold storm grey, narrowed to slits. He leaned closer to Alice, lowering his voice so it was steady, almost fatherly. "Alice, listen to me. Where is Leroy now?" Alice hugged the pack tighter. "He went out tonight. Said he was meeting his friends, the ones with fast cars and guns." Her small shoulders trembled. "He said when he came back, we'd go on a trip. One where nobody would find us." Every man in the bar exchanged looks, grim and sharp. They'd been in that world long enough to know what trip meant. Once a girl was moved, she disappeared forever. Blade slammed his fist on the counter, making bottles rattle. "We can't just sit here, Viper. The bastard's about to vanish with her." Viper's jaw tightened. He looked at Alice, this tiny girl holding a lunch pack stuffed with evidence powerful enough to break Leroy and his network. He looked at his men, criminals, ex-cons, outcasts who'd sworn never to get involved in someone else's mess again. But this wasn't someone else's mess anymore. It was right here, staring at them with wide eyes and a trembling voice. "Alice," Viper said softly, "you're safe here. But if Leroy's with his friends, it means trouble's coming. Trouble real soon." Alice nodded, though her lips quivered. She pressed the lunch pack against her chest, as if it were armor. The engines outside the bar rumbled again, closer this time. The neon signs buzzed and flickered. The men of the biker gang shifted, standing, reaching for chains, knives, and whatever steel they carried. And in that moment, they all knew the truth. Alice hadn't just stumbled into their bar. She'd dragged the monsters straight to their door. The hum of engines outside had faded into the night for the moment, but the bar stayed quiet, heavy with unspoken questions. Alice Robinson sat stiff on the stool, her yellow lunch pack clutched so tightly against her chest that her knuckles turned white. The men around her, 12 in total, looked like wolves circling prey, except this prey had chosen to walk right into their den and ask for help. Viper, scarred and steady, leaned against the bar counter. Blade paced, restless energy rolling off him like smoke. The rest, Tank, Ghost, Razorback, waited, their eyes flicking between Alice and the doorway. Everyone knew trouble was coming. What they didn't know yet was just how much of it this little girl had brought. "All right, sweetheart," Viper said finally, voice gravelly but low. "You said your mama gave you something. Said she told you to give it to people who fight monsters. Is that what's in the pack?" Alice nodded once, quick, jerky. Her bottom lip trembled. "Mama said it was important. That nobody would believe us unless I had proof. She made me promise." Blade stopped pacing and turned, arms crossed over his chest. "Proof of what?" His voice was sharper, impatient. Alice's fingers fumbled with the zipper. The sound, metal teeth parting, cut through the silence sharper than a blade. Slowly, she reached inside and pulled out the first item. They were photographs, bent at the corners, stuffed into a sandwich bag to keep them dry. She handed them to Viper with shaking hands. He opened the bag and slid the photos onto the bar under the dim neon glow. The first showed a woman's face, Clarissa Robinson, her cheek swollen, one eye purple and nearly shut. Another showed bruises on her forearms, as though someone had grabbed her hard and left fingerprints. A third was worse. A split lip, dried blood on a chin, a kitchen floor streaked red. "Christ," muttered Ghost, looking away. Tank swore under his breath. Even Blade, whose fists had done damage in more bar fights than he could remember, leaned in and hissed air between his teeth. "That bastard did this?" Alice nodded. "Uncle Leroy. Mama tried to hide it sometimes. But she said if it happened again, I had to keep the pictures safe. She told me the cops wouldn't believe her unless they saw how bad it was." The bikers exchanged looks. Hardened criminals who had seen bodies in alleys and blood on their own hands found themselves unsettled by the proof of a waitress's quiet suffering. There was something different about this violence. It was personal, relentless, cowardly. Viper slid the photos back into the bag and pushed them gently toward Alice. "You did good keeping these safe, kid. Real good." Alice dug again into the pack. This time, she pulled out a napkin from Ruby's diner. It was folded tightly, edges greasy. Inside was a small black thumb drive. "Pack." This time, she pulled out a napkin from Ruby's diner. It was folded tightly, edges greasy. Inside was a small black thumb drive. She placed it on the counter like it was heavier than steel. "Mama said this was the most important part. She told me Leroy kept records, names, numbers, dates, and she copied some when he wasn't looking. She said this drive was proof. But, she said if Leroy found out, we'd both disappear." Viper picked it up carefully, turning it over in his scarred fingers. Just an ordinary flash drive. But the weight of it in this bar was more than gold. Blade leaned in. "What's on it?" Alice shook her head. "I don't know. Mama said it's ledgers. Codes. Things about shipments. People." That word hung in the air like a blade. People. They all knew what it meant. Human trafficking. Flesh trade. Worse than drugs. Worse than guns. A business run on the backs of the voiceless. "This ain't just family drama," Blade muttered darkly. "This is trafficking money. This is cartel-level business." Alice hesitated before the last reveal. Her hands shook as she unzipped a second pocket. Out came a small plastic lunchbox, the kind with cartoon stickers peeling at the edges. She snapped it open and pushed it toward them. Inside were rolls of bills, bound tight with rubber bands. 20s, 50s, even hundreds, stacked in neat bundles. Where the hell did she get this? Razorback asked, stunned. Alice's voice cracked. Mama said Leroy hid money in the diner. In the freezer, in flour bags, under the sink. She grabbed what she could. Said it might buy us time if we had to run. Tank whistled low. "That's at least 10 grand right there." "And it ain't Leroy's pocket change," Blade growled. That's blood money. Trafficking money. The gang fell silent again, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them like a storm cloud. Ghost finally broke the silence. We can't keep her here. She needs to go to the cops. This, he gestured to the photos, the drive, the cash. This is evidence. Real evidence. And then what? Blade snapped. They'll stick her in foster care while Leroy's buddies crawl out of the woodwork to shut her up. Kid won't last a week. She's safer with the law than with us, Ghost shot back. We're not exactly saints here. Alice flinched at the raised voices. She hugged the pack tighter, like if she squeezed hard enough she could disappear inside it. Viper lifted a hand, silencing them. His voice was low, steady. Enough. He turned to Alice. Sweetheart, do you trust us? She looked up, wide-eyed. Mama said, find the people who fight monsters. I think that's you. That hit harder than a bullet. Blade swore under his breath, running a hand through his hair. Ghost looked away, ashamed. Viper nodded once. Then we protect her. At least until we know what's coming. We don't dump a kid like this into the system and walk away. The debate ended there. The men didn't all agree, but none were willing to argue against the quiet authority in Viper's tone, or against Alice's trembling faith in them. Alice set the photos, the drive, and the cash back into her pack carefully, like she was reloading a weapon. When she zipped it shut, the sound echoed in the bar. Blade exhaled hard. This just got a whole lot bigger. If Leroy knows she's got this stuff, he won't stop coming. And he won't come alone. As if summoned, headlights swept across the cracked blinds of the bar. One beam. Then another. Then a third. Engines. Louder this time. Closer. Alice's head snapped toward the door, her face draining of color. She whispered, voice so small it nearly vanished. That's them. Uncle Leroy's friends. The bikers rose as one, steel scraping against leather, chains rattling, the air charged with violence waiting to ignite. And in that moment, Alice Robinson's war became theirs. The rumble of engines outside grew louder, shaking the walls of the bar. Headlights swept across cracked blinds, flooding the room in white streaks before vanishing again. The outlaws stood tense, their hands resting on chains, knives, and iron bars, the tools they trusted more than guns. Alice gripped her yellow lunch pack against her chest, pressed into the shadow of the bar counter. Her breath came in sharp little gasps. She whispered to herself, over and over, the way Mama had taught her, be brave. Brave girls don't let monsters win. Brave girls fight with their hearts, even when they're small. The front doors banged open with a crash that shook the bottles on the shelves. Cold night air rushed in, carrying with it the heavy stink of sweat, liquor, and exhaust fumes. Leroy strode in first. His bulk filled the doorway, his boots clanging on the floorboards. His shirt was half open, revealing a chest covered in crude tattoos. His eyes, small and mean, scanned the room before locking onto the bikers standing in formation. Behind him, men in black suits spilled in, rifles slung across their chests, eyes flat and professional. They moved with the crisp confidence of soldiers, not local thugs, but cartel-trained muscle. She's here, Leroy barked, his voice echoing through the smoky bar. His lips twisted into a cruel grin. Alice, you come out now, girl. You've got something that belongs to us. Viper stepped forward, calm and steady, his scar catching the neon light. You don't get to demand anything here, Leroy. Leroy sneered, spit hitting the floor. That kid stole from me. From us. Hand her over, or my friends will turn this place into a slaughterhouse. The bikers moved as one. Blade shifted left, arms crossed, the knife at his belt gleaming. Ghost slid a chain from around his waist, the sound of links scraping metal. Tank hefted a length of iron pipe. They spread out, forming a wall of leather and steel between Alice and the intruders. She stays with us, Viper said flatly. The men in suits adjusted their rifles. Leroy's grin widened. You think you can stop this? You're dead men walking. Viper didn't blink. We've been dead men for years. Difference is, we don't scare easy. For a moment, silence. Then the air cracked as one of the suits raised his rifle. The first shot shattered a bottle behind the bar, glass spraying in every direction. Alice ducked, clutching her pack tighter, heart hammering in her throat. Then the bar erupted into chaos. Blade lunged forward, knife flashing. He grabbed the rifle barrel of the nearest suit, twisting it sideways as the man fired again. The bullet tore into the wall, splinters flying. Blade drove his knife upward, catching flesh. The man dropped with a scream. Tank swung his iron pipe in a wide arc, slamming into another suit's ribs. The crunch echoed like a gunshot. The man collapsed, gasping for air. Ghost whipped his chain in a brutal circle, catching a third man across the face. Blood sprayed as teeth scattered across the floor. Viper advanced on Leroy himself, moving with the patience of a predator. Tables flipped. Bottles shattered. Bullets ripped through wood and glass. The jukebox sparked and died, leaving only the roar of fists and the scream of metal. Alice pressed herself against the floor beneath the counter. The smell of spilled liquor burned her nose. Shards of glass dug into her knees. Her small hands clutched her yellow pack tighter, the straps digging into her skin. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Be brave." Mama said be brave. She could hear everything. The grunts of men, the sharp crack of a fist hitting flesh, the shouts of her uncle ordering the suits to kill them all. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But she stayed, because Mama had told her once, running doesn't always save you. Sometimes standing still does. Leroy himself charged forward, drawing a pistol from the waistband of his jeans. He fired wildly, a bullet tearing into a chair near Alice. Viper moved fast. With one hand, he caught Leroy's wrist. With the other, he whipped his heavy chain around Leroy's arm, the links biting deep into skin. Leroy cursed and swung, but Viper yanked the chain tight, twisting until the gun clattered to the floor. "You're done, Leroy," Viper growled. Blade slammed another man against the bar, head cracking against wood. Tank pinned the last suit under a table, fists rising and falling like hammers. The fight lasted less than 90 seconds, but it felt like forever to Alice. When silence finally fell, the floor was littered with broken glass, splintered wood, and groaning men. Leroy struggled against the chain wrapped around his arms and chest, but Viper tightened it until he dropped to his knees, gasping. Alice crawled out from under the counter, trembling. Her eyes darted across the wreckage. Blood smeared across the floor, men groaning, the bikers standing like scarred sentinels in the smoke. Her uncle's face twisted into rage as he spotted her. "You stupid little brat. You don't understand what you've done. You think they can save you? They'll die for you, Alice. You hear me? They'll all die." Alice's knees shook, but she stepped forward. Her voice, small but steady, cut through the haze. "No, you're the one who's finished. Mama said to find people who fight monsters. I found them." The bikers, bloodied, breathing hard, looked at her, and for the first time, there was silence without fear. Viper jerked the chain once more, forcing Leroy's head down. "She's right. And now you answer for what you've done." Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing closer. Red and blue lights flashed against the bar's windows. The bikers exchanged wary glances. The fight was over, but the war had only just begun. And Alice Robinson, clutching her yellow lunch pack like a shield, knew the monsters weren't finished. They would come again, but so would the men who stood for her. Click on the subscribe button, share the video to friends, and turn on your notification, because the story just got started. The bar smelled of gunpowder and whiskey. Smoke hung in the air like a ghost that refused to leave. Shattered glass crunched under boots as the devil's outcasts stood over the wreckage of their own kingdom. Tables lay splintered, chairs overturned, bottles dripping their contents into sticky puddles. The jukebox sparked once more, then died with a hiss. In the middle of it all, Leroy knelt bound in Viper's chain, his chest heaving, curses spilling from his mouth even as blood trickled down his temple. His men groaned nearby, their black suits torn, their rifles scattered uselessly across the floor. Alice stepped out from the shadows of the counter. Her knees wobbled, but her chin was set. The yellow lunch pack dangled from her shoulders, heavy but sure. Her eyes, too old for 8 years, locked on her uncle. "You don't own me." Her voice carried across the ruined bar. Leroy's head jerked up, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. Alice took another step, her fists clenched tight around the straps of her pack. I belong to Mama, and to people who fight monsters. The bikers froze, silence pressing down heavier than the smoke. Even Blade, whose fists were still bleeding, swallowed hard at the words. Viper tightened the chain one last time, cutting off Leroy's snarl. You hear that? The girl's not yours anymore. She's under our roof now. Alice's uncle spat blood on the floor. You think this changes anything? You think you can stand against us? She's marked. You all are. But Alice didn't flinch. She pulled her pack tighter, stood straighter, and repeated it like a promise. You don't own me. The first wail of sirens cut through the night. Red and blue lights strobed through the broken blinds, painting the bikers' faces in ghostly colors. Cops, Tank muttered, wiping blood from his knuckles. The outcasts exchanged glances. They were no strangers to police attention. Some had been in handcuffs more times than they could count. But tonight was different. Tonight, they had something worth protecting. If you believe the course is worth fighting for, then hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so as not to miss out on more stories like this. The doors banged open again, and this time it wasn't cartel muscle. It was uniforms. Officers swept inside, guns raised, voices sharp. Hands where we can see them. Viper raised both hands slowly, stepping away from Leroy, who still writhed against the chain. Take it easy. Situation's handled. The police fanned out, cuffing Leroy and his men first. The suits shouted about lawyers, about deals, but the cops ignored them, focusing instead on the carnage of the bar. One officer, a broad man with a badge that read S. Daniels, frowned at the sight of Alice clutching her pack in the corner. Who's the kid? Viper's voice dropped low. She's the reason this started. It didn't take long for the officers to notice the evidence spilling from Alice's pack. The photos in the plastic bag. The napkin-wrapped thumb drive. The rolls of cash. What the hell is this? Daniels muttered, kneeling by the bar to pick up the bag of photographs. He flipped through them, his face hardening with each picture. Jesus Christ. Alice's small voice carried. Mama told me, if anything happened, I had to keep evidence. Because Uncle Leroy, he hurts people. And nobody would believe her without proof. Another officer lifted the thumb drive. What's on this? Viper answered. Ledger. Records. Names, routes. Trafficking business. Daniels looked from Viper to Alice, then back to the drive. He signaled to another cop. Tag it. Get it to cybercrime. If this is what it looks like, it's not just one guy. We're talking organized ring. Alice hugged her pack tighter, as if parting with the drive was like cutting away her last piece of Mama. Hours blurred together. Statements were taken. Photos snapped. Leroy and his men were hauled out in cuffs, their curses fading into the night with the slam of car doors. By the time silence returned, dawn was creeping over the horizon. Alice sat at a corner table, the bikers forming a protective ring around her. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice nearly gone from answering the officers' endless questions. Finally, a woman arrived. Late 40s, hair pulled back, glasses perched low on her nose. She wore a state badge clipped to her blazer. Margaret Stevens, she introduced herself briskly. Child Protective Services. Alice shrank back against Viper's side. Margaret's eyes softened, but her tone stayed firm. Sweetheart, you've been through a terrible ordeal. We need to place you somewhere safe while this is investigated. Alice's hand shot out, gripping Viper's arm like a lifeline. No, I'm staying here. Margaret frowned. These men aren't legal guardians. There, she hesitated, glancing at the bikers, known felons. Alice shook her head fiercely. They fought the monsters. They kept me safe. I'm not going anywhere else. Viper's scarred face stayed calm, but his eyes burned. He looked directly at Margaret. She's not leaving with anyone tonight. She's been through enough. You try to pull her away now, you'll do more damage than Leroy ever managed. Margaret pursed her lips. The state has procedures. Protocols. Then the state's got a problem, Viper said evenly. Because she chose us. And we're not giving her up. Alice buried her face against his side, whispering words only he could hear. Please don't let them take me. And for the first time in years, Viper felt something he thought he'd buried. Responsibility that wasn't born from crime or survival, but from love. By noon, word had spread. The thumb drive was cracked open by the cyber team. What they found confirmed Alice's fears. Ledgers dating back 3 years. Names of victims. Routes across state lines. Payoffs to police and judges. Millions in transfers, coded but clear. It wasn't just Leroy. It was a network. A machine of flesh and money. And now, thanks to an 8-year-old girl with a yellow lunch pack, it had a crack in its armor. That night, long after the police had gone and the bar had gone quiet again, Alice sat between Viper and Blade. Her pack was back in her lap, lighter now but still her shield. She looked up at the scarred men, voice soft but sure. "I'm staying here. With my family." And though none of them would have admitted it out loud, every man in that room knew the truth. The girl wasn't just staying. She was changing them. The Devil's Outcasts clubhouse had never been quiet. Engines usually roared until dawn. Fights broke out as often as card games. The walls smelled of grease, smoke, and whiskey, and the fridge had never in its history contained anything that didn't come in a bottle. But on the morning after the siege, silence fell. It was the kind of silence that makes grown men shuffle their boots, clear their throats, and wonder what the hell comes next. Because sitting at the scarred oak table, swinging her legs like any child might, was Alice Robinson, with her yellow lunch pack resting safely on her lap. And she wasn't leaving. Viper leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching as Blade, 6'3", tattooed knuckles, known in 3 states for bar fights, tried to braid Alice's hair. It wasn't going well. "Hold still, kid." Blade frowned, wrestling with the strands like they were cables from an engine. "This can't be harder than rewiring a carburetor." Alice giggled. "You're pulling too hard." Blade grunted. "Hair's too slippery. Ain't got grip." Tank, passing by with a mug of coffee, nearly spit it out laughing. "Brother, you look like you're trying to strangle a rope." Alice beamed up at Blade, her face lighting the room in a way no neon sign ever had. "It's okay. Mama wasn't good at braids either." Something shifted in Blade's chest at that. He loosened his touch, careful this time, and though the end result was lopsided and crooked, Alice patted it proudly. Perfect. For a man who had knocked out teeth without blinking, Blade suddenly looked like he might cry. By evening, the clubhouse fridge had changed. Where once it had been stacked wall to wall with beer cans and leftover takeout, now a shelf was lined with juice boxes, fruit cups, and little containers of yogurt. "Who the hell bought this?" Growler grumbled, reaching past the apple juice for a cold one. Viper raised a brow. "You want the kid drinking whiskey with her breakfast?" Growler muttered something unintelligible, but when Alice skipped by later and pulled a grape juice from the shelf, nobody complained. Viper had never thought of himself as a teacher. He led men. He commanded respect. But when he saw Alice freeze at the sound of a backfiring bike outside, her small hands clutching the straps of her lunch pack, her eyes wide with remembered fear, he crouched down to her level. "You scared, little bird?" Alice nodded, her lips trembling. "All right," Viper said, his voice low and steady, the way you calm a spooked animal. "Let me show you something." He stood and planted his boots wide, fists at his side, his scar catching the light. "This is called holding your ground. When the world gets loud and you feel small, you plant yourself like this. Shoulders back. Chin up. Like you're telling the monsters they'll have to go through you to get anywhere." Alice blinked at him, then mimicked the stance. Her sneakers squeaked on the wood floor, but her spine straightened. Viper nodded. "That's it. Don't run. Don't bow. Just stand. That's all it takes sometimes." She tried it again, this time lifting her chin higher. "Like Mama told me," she whispered. "Don't let him see you cry." Viper swallowed hard. He didn't tell her she was already braver than most men he knew. The first nightmare came 3 nights later. Alice woke screaming, her voice high and broken, the kind that ripped through the clubhouse like a gunshot. By the time Viper reached her room, half the gang had already piled in. Men who had stared down guns without flinching now hovering awkwardly at the door, helpless. Alice sat upright on the mattress, clutching her pack like a shield, tears streaking down her face. "He's coming," she sobbed. Uncle Leroy's coming back. He'll take me. No, kid. Blade sat at the edge of her bed, his huge hands surprisingly gentle. He ain't comin'. He's locked away. You're safe. But Alice shook her head, rocking back and forth. He said I'm his. He said I'm next. The room went silent. Those words carried a weight none of the men could ignore. Then Viper knelt beside her, steady as stone. Alice, look at me. Her tear-filled eyes lifted. You see all of us here? He gestured to the crowd of leather-clad men, faces scarred and fierce. We're the bigger monsters. Nothing gets past us. You understand? Alice sniffled, clutching her pack tighter. The bigger monsters? Viper nodded. That's right. And we fight for you. Every damn night if we have to. For the first time since she'd woken, Alice's breathing slowed. She curled into Blade's side, exhaustion finally pulling her back down. And as the men filed quietly out, no one laughed at the sight of their enforcer, holding a child, like the most fragile thing in the world. One quiet afternoon, Alice sat in the garage, knees tucked under her chin, staring at the patch of sky visible through the open door. Her lunch pack rested beside her, crayons spilling out where she'd been drawing. Snake noticed her silence and sat nearby without a word. After a while, Alice whispered, Mama used to tell me, when you miss someone in heaven, you should talk out loud, so they can hear you. Snake swallowed. That's smart advice. Alice hesitated, then closed her eyes. Hi, Mama, she whispered, her voice trembling but steadying with each word. I'm okay now. The scary men are gone. The monsters fought them off, just like you said they would. I still get scared at night, but they tell me I'm safe. And I believe them. Her lips wobbled. I miss you, but I think you'd like it here. They're not as scary as they look. Snake wiped his eyes before she could see. In the weeks that followed, the clubhouse changed. Blade kept practicing braids until he finally got them right. Tank built Alice a swing in the yard from chains and an old tire. Growler, of all people, learned how to make pancakes because the kid can't eat cereal every damn day. And every night, before bed, Alice unzipped her pack and made sure her treasures were still inside. Drawings, crayons, the few photographs of her mother, and the empty napkin that once held the thumb drive. It wasn't evidence anymore. It was her shield, her reminder. One night, as the gang sat around the table, Alice perched between Viper and Blade. She leaned against Viper's side, her small voice breaking the quiet. I think Mama was right, she said softly. About what, little bird? Viper asked. That if bad things ever happened, I should find the people who fight monsters. The room went still. Then Blade chuckled low, ruffling her hair. Guess you found the ugliest damn monsters around. Alice smiled, her eyes heavy with sleep but brighter than ever. The best ones. And with that, she drifted off, safe in the arms of wolves who had never known they could be anything else. The devil's outcasts could fight with fists, knives, or chains. But nothing had prepared them for ties, suits, and the quiet hush of a courtroom. It had been 2 months since the siege. Leroy and his men were still behind bars, facing charges that would bury them for life. The thumb drive from Alice's lunch pack had sparked federal investigations, and the trafficking ring was crumbling. But the state had its own concern. What to do with Alice Robinson? The morning of the hearing, the outcasts walked into the courthouse like wolves in a sheep pen. Leather-cut vests had been traded for stiff jackets that didn't quite fit. Tank's tie was crooked. Growler looked like he might choke on his collar. Blade muttered curses under his breath the entire walk through the metal detectors. Alice walked between them, small hand clasped around Viper's. Her yellow lunch pack bounced at her side, a splash of color in the grey halls. The social worker, Ms. Reynolds, trailed close. A stern woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and professional, she had been assigned to Alice's case since the night of the siege. Though she had been skeptical at first, weeks of visits had begun to soften her. She'd seen Alice's grades improve, watched her laugh again, and noticed the way the bikers hovered like protective wolves. Still, her duty was to the law, not sentiment. And the law said outlaw bikers couldn't be guardians. The judge, an older man with steel-grey hair, cleared his throat as the hearing began. We're here to determine the custody of Alice Robinson, age 8. The petitioners are members of an outlaw motorcycle club, and the state has concerns regarding their criminal records and environment. The state's attorney wasted no time. These men are convicted felons, she declared, pointing toward the outcasts like they were specimens in a cage. They are known associates of organized crime, with histories of violence, illegal weapons, and narcotics. To place a child, an already traumatized child, in their care would be reckless and irresponsible. Blade shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Viper placed a hand on his shoulder, forcing him to stay silent. The attorney continued, her voice cutting. Alice needs stability. She needs structure. She needs guardians who can provide a safe, lawful home. The foster system, though not perfect, can provide that. These men cannot. The words hung heavy in the air. Alice's small hand tightened around Viper's. When the judge called her name, Alice stood, her yellow pack slung across her back like armor. She climbed into the witness chair, legs too short to reach the floor. The bailiff swore her in. Her voice was soft but steady. I promise to tell the truth. The attorney leaned forward. Alice, do you know the men sitting behind you? Yes, Alice said. They're my family. The courtroom murmured. The attorney frowned. Family? Sweetheart, they're not related to you by blood, are they? Alice shook her head. Family isn't just blood. Mama told me that. Family is who fights for you. The attorney tried again. But wouldn't you feel safer in a normal home? With a yard? With a family that doesn't have criminal records? Alice's eyes flicked toward Viper and Blade. Then she straightened her back, remembering his lesson. Hold your ground. They're the ones who keep the monsters away, she said. Uncle Leroy hurt Mama. He hurt me. But when I asked for help, these men stood up. They didn't let him take me. They kept me safe. They still do. I don't want to go anywhere else. Her words rang through the room like a bell. Even the judge's face softened. Next came the bikers. Blade was first, and the courtroom braced itself. The man looked like violence personified, tattoos crawling up his neck, scars etched across his knuckles. But when he spoke, his voice was gruff and low, stripped of bravado. I ain't good with words, Blade muttered. Never been. But that little girl, he gestured toward Alice. She's tougher than most grown men I've known. She asked for help. So we gave it. That's it. I don't care what you call us. Outlaws, criminals. Doesn't matter. She chose us. And I'll fight anyone who tries to take her away. There was silence when he stepped down. Tank followed, surprisingly gentle. I don't got kids of my own, he said, fidgeting with his tie. Didn't think I ever would. But she's ours now. You should see her. She's Logan again. Sleepin' through most nights. She makes us better men, Your Honor. That's gotta count for something. Finally, Viper stood. The courtroom seemed to shrink under his presence. His scar caught the light, his storm grey eyes hard, but not unkind. Judge, I've led men most my life. I know loyalty, and I know family. Blood don't mean a damn thing. What matters is who stands with you in the fire. That little girl walked into our bar one night, scared out of her mind, carrying proof of monsters the cops wouldn't touch. She asked us to fight for her. So we did. We ain't perfect, but we'll stand and fight for her, till the day we die. That's family. His words carried the weight of truth, unpolished but unshakable. When it came time for Ms. Reynolds to speak, she hesitated. In my career, I've seen many children come through the system, she said carefully. I've seen good homes, and I've seen bad ones. At first, I was certain Alice didn't belong with these men. Their records, their lifestyle, it's not what we usually consider safe. But I cannot ignore what I've witnessed over the last 2 months. Alice's grades have improved. Her nightmares are fewer. She laughs. She trusts them. And more importantly, they listen to her. She paused, then added, I cannot tell this court what choice to make. But I can say this. I have never seen a child so fiercely protected. And I believe Alice has already made her choice. If you're eager to know the judge's verdict, like this video, and comment what you think the judge would say. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled. The room held its breath. Finally he spoke. This is not a conventional case. The petitioners are indeed men with criminal pasts. But the evidence presented, the child's testimony, the social worker's observations, and the undeniable bond between Alice and these men, compels me to rule in favor of custody. Alice Robinson will remain under the guardianship of the Devil's Outcasts, as a collective household. The gavel struck. So ordered. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, outrage from the state's attorney. But all Alice heard was Viper's steady heartbeat as she threw her arms around him, her lunch pack thumping against his chest. "See," she whispered fiercely. "I told you. You're my family." And for the first time in years, Viper smiled without reservation. That night, back at the clubhouse, Alice drew a picture. It showed herself, holding her yellow lunch pack, standing between a group of towering bikers with wolves' eyes and scarred faces. Above them, in a child's uneven letters, she wrote, "Family equals who fights monsters." The outcasts hung it on the wall. And for the first time, the clubhouse didn't feel like a den of criminals. It felt like home. The outcasts never thought their clubhouse would echo with children's laughter. For years, its soundtrack had been the rumble of engines, the crash of bottles, the slam of fists against tables. But now, on Saturdays, a new rhythm filled the air. High voices, running footsteps, and the occasional squeak of chalk against a blackboard. And at the center of it all was Alice Robinson, her yellow lunch pack hanging from her shoulders like a banner. It started small. Alice had asked Viper one night, her voice quiet but firm. "Mama said if you learn something important, you're supposed to teach it to others. Can I help other kids? Like me?" Viper had frowned. "What do you mean, little bird?" "Kids who got hurt. Kids with uncles, or daddies who are mean. They need to know what Mama told me, that you can be brave, that you can take evidence, that there are people who fight monsters." The room had gone still. Blade muttered, "She's 8 years old and already talking like a general." But they agreed. And so, the next Saturday, 3 children came. Kids Alice had met at school, kids with shadows in their eyes. Their parents didn't ask too many questions. They just saw the way Alice walked now, straighter, stronger, and followed. Alice stood in front of them in the clubhouse meeting room, the same place where the outcasts had planned raids and patched brothers in. "Hi," she said, her voice small but sure. "We're the brave ones. That's what Mama would call us. We're not scared anymore. And if we are, we tell the truth anyway." The bikers, leaning in doorways and pretending not to listen, felt their chests tighten. Alice unpacked her yellow lunch pack and laid everything on the table like sacred relics. A notebook where she wrote brave rules. A crayon drawing of her mother, smiling, with the words "Be strong" above her. A spare disposable camera tank had bought her. And a folded napkin, empty now, but kept as a reminder of the thumb drive it once held. She pointed to each as she spoke. "Mama said being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even if you're shaking." She held up the camera. "Mama said if grown-ups are mean, take evidence. Pictures. Record things. The police believe pictures more than words." She touched the napkin. "And Mama said if bad things happen, you give the evidence to people who fight monsters. Sometimes that's police. Sometimes it's scarier people." She glanced at Blade and grinned. The kids giggled, and Blade actually flushed red. Finally, Alice touched her pack. "And Mama said always keep your safe things with you. Snacks, numbers to call, things that remind you you're not alone. This is my shield." The children nodded, wide-eyed. At first, the bikers kept their distance. They didn't know what to do with a room full of kids. But slowly they were pulled in. Tank set up the blackboard and drew maps with safe houses marked. "If you're in trouble, these are places you can run to." Growler, gruff and awkward, handed out juice boxes like he was passing grenades. Blade showed them how to shout from their bellies. "Loud voices scare bad men," he explained. The clubhouse rattled with children screaming "no," until their throats were raw, and the bikers laughed so hard they nearly cried. Viper stood at the back, silent but watchful, his scarred face softer than any of the kids realized. Word spread. By the 3rd Saturday, there were 12 children. By the 5th, nearly 20. The outcasts were stunned. Their clubhouse, once feared by the neighborhood, was becoming a sanctuary. It wasn't long before schools, and even local police noticed. A principal called Ms. Reynolds, the social worker. I don't know what those bikers are doing, but kids who never spoke up before are talking. They're bringing in photos, journals. We've got cases opening that would have stayed buried. Detective Alvarez, once a sworn enemy of the outcasts, showed up at the clubhouse one Saturday. The bikers tensed, but Alice greeted him with her pack slung over her shoulder. "These are my friends," she told him firmly. "They fight monsters with me." Alvarez raised a brow. Then he looked around at the walls, now covered with children's drawings, and at the kids laughing while Blade taught them how to yell. He sighed. "Never thought I'd say this," Alvarez muttered. "But keep doing what you're doing." The outcasts smirked. Criminals or not, they were becoming something new, an army for kids who had no one else. Meanwhile, the ledgers from Alice's pack continued to unravel Leroy's world. Dozens of names were listed, coded, but cracked by federal investigators. Safe houses, payment trails, routes stretching across 3 states, all exposed. One by one, arrests were made. Men Leroy once called allies were dragged away in cuffs. From a spot in the clubhouse, Alice watched the news with wide eyes. When she saw Leroy's name mentioned, she whispered, "Mama, we did it. We stopped them." The bikers exchanged glances. None of them said it out loud, but they all felt the same thing. This little girl had done more to bring down monsters than the law ever had. By the end of the summer, the brave ones had nearly 30 children attending. The outcasts built shelves for books, brought in tables for crafts, even set aside a corner of the bar for a chalkboard wall where the kids could write their names. Alice stood at the front every week, her yellow pack always with her, and taught what Mama had taught her. How to be brave, how to gather truth, how to find safe people. But now she added something of her own. "You're not alone," she told them. "Not anymore. We're all brave ones now. And if the monsters come, we'll fight together." The kids cheered, and the bikers, hardened men who had lived in shadows, felt something stir inside them they hadn't known they still had. Hope. One evening, after the last of the kids had gone home, Alice curled up on a couch with her pack at her side. Blade sat nearby, pretending not to watch as she drew. "What are you making, kid?" he asked. Alice held up the picture. A gang of bikers with children riding on their shoulders, all smiling. Above them, in big letters, she had written, "The Brave Ones." Blade cleared his throat, looking away quickly. But his voice was rough when he muttered, "Hell, kid, you're turning us into something we never thought we could be." Alice smiled. Mama said even monsters can fight for good. And in that moment, surrounded by wolves who had chosen to protect lambs, she believed it with all her heart. The Devil's Outcasts clubhouse didn't look like itself anymore. 1 year had passed since Alice Robinson walked through its doors, clutching a yellow lunch pack and begging strangers to hide her from her uncle. The world outside still called the gang criminals, outlaws, thugs. But inside those walls, something else had taken root. The walls were no longer bare or smeared with smoke stains. They were covered with Alice's drawings, stick figures of bikers with big smiles, colorful crayon sunsets, crooked hearts with words like family and the brave ones scribbled across them. Where gambling tables once sat, a chalkboard now stood, covered in scrawled names and childish doodles. The room that had once reeked of whiskey now smelled faintly of crayons, juice boxes, and the faint trace of motorcycle oil. The wolves had built themselves a den not just for outlaws, but for children who needed a place to breathe. Alice stood at the front of the meeting room, her yellow lunch pack hanging at her side. It looked different now, not stuffed with hidden evidence, not heavy with fear. Instead, it carried crayons, snacks, and a neat stack of cards with emergency numbers written in bold, clear ink. She held one of the cards up to the circle of children seated around her. "Rule 1, she said, her voice firm. "Always keep your safe numbers. Police, teachers, people you can trust. Write them down. Keep them with you." The children nodded. Some scribbled notes. Some clutched their own little backpacks, inspired by Alice's. She smiled. "Rule 2. If something bad happens, take proof. Words can be ignored. Pictures can't. Mama taught me that. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. And Rule 3. Alice's voice softened, but her eyes gleamed with steel. You're not alone. Ever. You're brave ones now. And brave ones don't let each other fall. The children, more than 30 of them now, lifted their chins. Some clapped. Some just held their packs tighter. And in that moment, the room felt more like a sanctuary than a clubhouse. From the back of the room, Viper watched, arms crossed, Scar catching the dim light. Blade leaned beside him, pretending not to be emotional but failing. His jaw clenched. His eyes never left the little girl at the front. She's something else, Blade muttered. Viper nodded once. Blade gave a short, almost disbelieving laugh. Never thought we'd end up here. A bunch of felons running, a Saturday class for kids. Viper's gaze stayed fixed on Alice. She was standing tall, her yellow pack bouncing as she moved, teaching children to be braver than she ever should have had to be. Maybe, Viper said quietly, this is who we were meant to be. The words hung heavy, true as iron. Though Leroy himself sat rotting in prison, his shadow lingered. His name came up in news reports as his trial dragged on. His network had crumbled. Dozens of arrests, businesses shut down, trafficking routes dismantled. Alice never said his name anymore. She didn't need to. His power had been shattered, not just by the law, but by a little girl who had dared to carry evidence against him. Now, his name was nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered by criminals who once called him ally. The brave ones, however, had become something far louder. The outcasts weren't saints. They still rode, still drank, still lived by their own code. But things had changed. Blade had learned to braid hair, so well that Alice trusted him more than any brush. Tank had started building shelves and swings, turning the clubhouse into a makeshift community center. Even Growler, who once cursed at the idea of kids in their space, now kept juice boxes stocked without complaint. It wasn't just Alice anymore. The outcasts had become guardians to dozens. The wolves had chosen to fight for lambs, and in doing so, had become something greater than either. That evening, after the meeting ended, and the last child had gone home, Alice sat on the clubhouse steps. The sun dipped low, casting the world in gold. She clutched her pack and tilted her head toward the sky. "Hi, Mama," she whispered. Her voice was steady now, not trembling the way it once had. "I'm safe. The monsters are gone. And guess what? We're helping other kids now. Just like you said we should. I'm not scared anymore. Not when I've got my family." Her eyes softened, and she leaned against Viper's side when he came to sit next to her. "You did good, little bird," he murmured. Alice smiled faintly. Mama would be proud. Viper's scarred hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "She already is." Inside, Blade pinned Alice's newest drawing to the wall. It showed a little girl with a yellow lunch pack, standing in front of a group of towering bikers. Above it, in uneven but bold letters, she had written, "Even monsters can fight for good." The men stood in silence, staring at it. No one dared laugh, or joke, or look away, because they all knew it was true. Alice never stopped carrying her yellow lunch pack. Not as a burden, not as a reminder of pain, but as a shield of courage, as proof that evidence matters, as a sign that even the smallest child can topple giants. And as long as she carried it, the outcasts carried her. A family, a brotherhood, a pack that had found its purpose in protecting the smallest, fiercest warrior they'd ever known. The brave one who taught them to be brave.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed the story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.